Welcome to this in-depth news explainer. We're tracking a really fast-moving, incredibly high-stakes global crisis right now. The US-Iran ceasefire? Well, it's unraveling. And the ripple effects of this diplomatic breakdown are literally tearing through global energy markets, regional stability, and yes, your local economy. We've synthesized all the latest grounded reporting to show you exactly where the world stands at this very moment.
To make sense of all these live updates, we've broken things down into 5 key areas. We'll start with the ceasefire failure, move into the massive global energy shock, look at the impact right on the home front, track how the regional war is expanding, and finally, survey the broader geopolitical chessboard.
So, let's dive right into that first piece, the collapse of the ceasefire.
Things are looking incredibly bleak on the diplomatic front. U.S. President Trump just forcefully rejected Iran's latest response to a peace proposal. Speaking straight from the Oval Office, he called the Iranian terms totally unacceptable. He went as far as saying the ceasefire is currently on massive life support. What's interesting here is that, according to the president, Iran had previously hinted they'd allow the U.S. to help extract highly enriched uranium, but then they totally walked that back in their formal written response.
But when we look at the other side, it's a completely different story. Iranian President Pezeshkian is insisting his country is only demanding its legitimate rights. He's offering zero concessions right now. He's framing Iran's position not as surrendering, but as a resolute defense of their national interests, making it crystal clear that Tehran isn't going to bow down to what they are calling U.S. bullying.
And this, right here, perfectly illustrates the core deadlock. It's almost like 2 different realities. On one hand, you have the U.S. and Israel demanding permanent structural changes. We're talking the complete removal of enriched uranium, dismantling proxy networks, and completely halting ballistic missile production. But on the exact opposite end, Iran is demanding an immediate end to the conflict across the board, including in Lebanon. Plus, they want the U.S. naval blockades on their ports lifted and their frozen assets trapped in foreign banks released. The gap between these 2 sides, it's absolutely massive.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu really hammered home this hardline stance during a recent 60 Minutes interview. He was emphatic that while the joint operations with the U.S. have degraded a lot of Iran's capabilities, this war effort simply cannot end until all of Iran's nuclear material is extracted and those enrichment sites are dismantled entirely.
To put the military side of things into perspective, President Trump noted that U.S. forces have hit roughly 70% of their intended targets inside Iran, and he issued a really stark warning. He said that while Iranian leaders are defeated, that doesn't mean the campaign is over. The U.S. could conceivably keep these combat operations going for 2 more weeks just to cross off every single remaining target on their list.
Okay, moving on to our second main point. Let's look at how this diplomatic failure is instantly triggering a massive global energy shock.
The absolute epicenter of this economic earthquake is the Strait of Hormuz. In direct retaliation for those initial U.S. and Israeli strikes, Iran has completely gridlocked this strategic, vital gateway. And the result? A severe chokehold on the primary transit route for the entire world's oil and liquid natural gas. They've essentially frozen normal maritime traffic.
The sheer scale of this disruption is honestly staggering. The CEO of Saudi Aramco, Ami Nasser, put out a terrifying warning. Global markets are going to lose 100 million barrels of oil for every single week this strait stays closed. To put that in context, they've already seen an unprecedented supply loss of about 1 billion barrels.
Nasser really underscored the gravity of this. He called it the largest energy supply shock the world has ever experienced. And here's the kicker. He cautioned investors that even if the Strait of Hormuz magically opened up today, it would take months for the market to rebalance. If the blockade drags on, we're looking at a market normalization process that stretches all the way into 2027.
But listen, it isn't just about oil and gas. This is rapidly becoming a matter of global food security. The United Nations is warning that this shipping standoff is blocking critical fertilizer shipments from reaching farmers all over the world. A UN task force predicts we literally only have a few weeks to avert a massive humanitarian disaster, one that could push 45 million more people into hunger and starvation. Unsurprisingly, the market reaction has been brutal. Right after President Trump took to Truth Social to reject those Iranian peace terms, international benchmark Brent crude prices shot right back up over $100 a barrel in early trading. Investors are clearly bracing for even deeper supply shocks.
So what does this all mean for you and me? Let's transition to the impact right on the home front. Looking at the domestic fallout, U.S. gas prices have skyrocketed over 50% since the war started, hitting a painful $4.52 a gallon. In response, President Trump intends to suspend the 18.4-cent federal gas tax for a period of time, though that's going to need an act of Congress to actually happen. Meanwhile, over in India, a country that imports 90% of its crude oil, the situation is even more dire. Prime Minister Modi is practically begging citizens to adopt wartime austerity. He's urging people to work from home, carpool, cancel foreign travel, and even stop buying gold, all just to save the country's vital foreign exchange reserves.
Now, let's pivot and look at how this regional war is violently expanding across borders.
The domino effect here has been devastating. You can see it clearly on this timeline. Just days after the initial February 28th strikes, Iran-backed Hezbollah escalated things, pulling Israel into a completely parallel war in southern Lebanon. Fast forward to right now, and despite a ceasefire that was signed a whole month ago, the fighting there is still incredibly intense. Over 1 million people have had to flee their homes, and the death toll in Lebanon is tragically nearing 3,000.
And the reality on the ground in Lebanon just keeps deteriorating. The IDF is actively ordering urgent civilian evacuations across multiple villages amid heavy ongoing strikes. But at the same time, we're seeing internal military discipline as well. The Israeli military just court-martialed its own forces, sending soldiers to military prison for desecrating Christian statues, including an image of the Virgin Mary in southern Lebanon. That was an act that sparked widespread international condemnation.
You know, this instability is spreading like wildfire. The fragile truce in the Gulf is absolutely being tested. The UAE is blaming Iran for new drone attacks that caused a ship fire off the coast of Qatar. At the exact same time, Kuwait is reporting unidentified drones breaching its airspace. And inside Iran, an incredibly fierce domestic crackdown is underway. Authorities just executed a 29-year-old elite university student. They accused him of spying for the CIA and Mossad, but human rights groups are arguing those charges were entirely based on forced confessions extracted through torture.
Finally, let's zoom way out to the geopolitical chessboard and see how the global superpowers are maneuvering.
We are witnessing a rapid-fire series of diplomatic moves and countermoves right now. The UK just slapped massive new sanctions on an Iranian criminal group called the Zindashti Network after a string of anti-Semitic attacks in London. Over in Tehran, Iran's foreign ministry officially halted UN nuclear monitoring, claiming their atomic sites were too damaged by the US and Israeli strikes for the IAEA to do their job. But then, in a very calculated move, Iran did allow a specific Qatari liquid natural gas tanker to pass through the blocked Strait of Hormuz. It's a classic confidence-building measure, clearly aimed at keeping mediator nations at the table.
Meanwhile, the U.S. military is definitely flexing its muscles. The Navy made a huge point of officially surfacing an Ohio-class ballistic missile submarine right in the waters of Gibraltar. The Sixth Fleet was very clear about this. This rare public display of their most survivable nuclear deterrent was designed to show capability and unwavering commitment to NATO allies while global tensions are soaring.
And the high-stakes diplomacy isn't stopping. President Trump is heading straight to Beijing for a massive summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping. The absolute top agenda item, the Iran war. The U.S. wants to put serious pressure on Beijing to cut off its vital oil purchases from Tehran, because those Chinese purchases are currently keeping Iran's state coffers full despite all the Western sanctions.
So as we wrap up this explainer, we're left staring at a deeply, deeply fractured global landscape, with diplomacy failing, regional proxy wars bleeding across borders, and tens of millions of barrels of oil, plus life-saving fertilizers, choked off from the global market. We really have to ask the hard question: how long can the world's economy and its people withstand this unprecedented pressure before snapping entirely? Thank you so much for joining us, and definitely keep watching this space as the situation continues to unfold.